Mr. Sam Palmisano.
I don't know what I'm supposed to say next. Luke, outstanding. I tried to sing, but my night was a little earlier than yours, but I see we both have a raspy voice. Ron, thank you very much for allowing me to address everyone today. The honorary degree, I'm blown away by it. It's a little emotional. You know, I want the undergraduates to understand that my first honorary degree was a Bachelor of Arts from the Johns Hopkins University. That's not in the script, by the way. You'll see when I go back and forth. History, I thought I'd point out, everybody thinks history is sort of studying the past and in technology. You'll find that as you have to solve problems that are imponderable, it does help to understand the mistakes that your predecessors have made, and at least try to avoid those. I'm not saying, there's no guarantee of success, but you can skip the obvious. But I also would like to obviously condole my congratulations to the class and thank the faculty and all of our guests for coming today. It's a wonderful honor to graduate from this esteemed university. Maybe at some point in your life you'll realize that all the hard work was worthwhile, but I can assure you at the age of 60 you'll still have nightmares about your finals at the Johns Hopkins University. I still do. Anyway, I could have worked harder, I guess, along the way, and perhaps it wouldn't have been as strenuous at the end. But again, I think the families require a lot of note. Luke thanked his parents. I think that's, of course, very appropriate. I myself and my wife Missy is with me. We went through 3 of these last year, and we have 1 more to go this weekend. So we understand where the families are, and congratulations to all of you and what your children have accomplished. The other thing I thought I'd relate to is that I have something in common with many of you. We both are graduating. I'm graduating from a career at IBM, and you're graduating from a storied institution called the Johns Hopkins University. Of course, you sit out there and you look at this old guy up here and you say, there's nothing in common. You know, this can't be. You know, this is like a fiction. So I thought the best thing for me to do is draw an analogy to my good friend Luke and why we have so much in common. We both pursued a career in athletics above academics. Neither of us were big enough to participate in our sport without being dead in 10 days. So we chose alternative careers. As we did so, Luke and I did not know what we were going to do. And I was working construction, and a recruiter from IBM came to the Hopkins campus looking for women in engineering. True story. Colleague of mine, a PhD student in physics, rang me up and said, Sam, you got his business card, call this guy up. I said, well, what do they want? He goes, they want women in engineering. I said, well, I don't know that I fit. You know? He goes, well, it's better than digging ditches. So I applied for a job. The other thing I'd like to say, 40 years or 39 years later, you can rest assured you still won't know what you want to do. So don't despair. Things don't change much in life, but I'm not trying to discourage you. I thought what I'd do is I'd go back, though, to 1973, when I sat out there like you, but we were in Gilman Hall. This was a field. It wasn't a stadium. There weren't championship much of anything sitting up there, you know, those days. And I thought I'd relate to some things that were going on in 1973. This is a little bit of my history training. You might find this, that there was an unpopular war was ending. A president was reelected for a second term, but it didn't end political turmoil. In fact, it was only ratcheted up after his reelection. We all remembered race riots, student unrest, and some of us survived linear algebra because we could take everything pass fail in 1970. The economy was tepid. So let's think about the consensus today for those of you that watch the cable TV programs. Thank you very much, John. What are we dealing with? Unpopular wars are ending. Protracted unemployment, tepid economic environment, a political system paralyzed by partisanship, mounting debt and social cost, the prospect of diminished future of the United States, as new nations take their place in the global economy. It's almost 40 years, and then, you know, there are some similarities. Maybe not as stark, maybe we weren't as aware, we did not have the benefit of the internet or cable news. But nonetheless, if you go back then, as I sat out there, neither I nor my classmates were beset by a grinding self-doubt or fear of failure. We didn't believe that our worst days lay ahead. I don't believe it now, and I bet you don't believe it. But in case, just in case any of you do, I'm going to try to persuade you of another point of view that you won't hear on the evening news channels. The fact is, I think there's a more exciting road ahead of you. For your generation, it's more exciting than it's ever been in recent times. I'm not talking about a polite statement that I'm expected to make as a commencement speaker. I sincerely believe this. I believe that you're privileged to be entering your working life at a great inflection point of modern history. One in simple terms might say, where there is so much to do and so many tools available to do it with. Several years ago, the New York Times author or reporter Tom Friedman declared the world was flat. He meant globalization had arrived in full force. We all know why that is. Open trade agreements, increasing political stability, both have had an impact around the world, lifted really hundreds of millions of people into the middle class and maybe another billion to go. So it's a wonderful thing. But I'm sure if somebody stood up here 39 or 40 years ago in 1973, some old guy reflected on this possibility or thought about Facebook, Twitter, Groupon, what have you, LinkedIn, you would have thought he was crazy, or we would have thought he was absolutely whacked out and lost it. Well, obviously that's not the case. Things do change quite rapidly, and technology, as we know, drives a lot of that, as well as global economics and integration of the world. But you know, I know as you think about technology, we always focus what I call the obvious, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the like. But I really would encourage you to look a little deeper, because they're just indications of the potential that exist for how you all can change everything that occurs in the systems of the world. So a little bit of data to prove that it can be analytical when necessary. There are 1 billion transistors for every person on the face of the earth. There are 2 billion people on the internet. More than 1 trillion things interconnected as intelligent objects. Data or computing is put in everything you don't even recognize as computers anymore. Every product, the world, the power grids, water systems, supply chains, healthcare, entire cities are being instrumented, interconnected, and becoming intelligent. It's going to generate, over the next 10 or 15 years, 44 times more data than it does exist today. That's 35 zettabytes. That's 1 followed by 21 zeros. I'm sure our engineering majors out there in the audience didn't need to explain that, but for the liberal arts guys like Luke and myself, I felt that it was necessary. If you don't buy it from me, how about listening to your professors? Some of you, I hope, did better than I anyway. Dr. Hain, Dr. Bagger, or some of your alums, Dr. Akbar, who are convinced that the future belongs to those who figure out what to do with all that information. It's an enormous natural resource. It's a gusher of data, and thanks to advanced computation, yes, cloud computing, massive supercomputers and the like, and advanced software, wonderful algorithms for the math majors out there, you can sense something really big is about to happen. The world's changing. You don't fight crime by adding more cops and giving them better equipment. You do that through data. One of the safest large cities in the world, New York, has done it through data. Traffic congestion, it's not done by making bigger roads. You do it through real-time information and pricing and changing schedules, using economic incentive to address not only congestion but pollution. You also address things like consumer demand with supply chains and product inventory, real-time between retailers and manufacturers, and changing consumer wishes. And yes, of course, you know, point location marketing is you will walk down the street past your favorite store and you get a tweet as what's being promoted at that point in time. So you live it every day, but it's a combination of all these things. So that's where we're headed now. And so many of you are probably thinking, if not the undergraduates, maybe your parents and friends, therefore you must be an engineer, or you must be in math. And Sam, coming from IBM, surely that must be the case. I would tell you that the good news, it's not that. You can change a country, a company, or individual. All it requires in today's environment is the skills you've already have and a little bit of leadership. and the willingness to think outside the box and take a little risk. Be enterprising, imaginative, and then have a direct impact on what you see and what you want to touch. That's what you have ahead of you, class of 2012, and it's a wonderful opportunity. Every one of you can form communities, can reimagine institutions and enterprises, even entire industries. It's never been possible before, and it's so easy today because all traditional boundaries have come down. I know that's hard for governments to understand and comprehend as they try to defend something that no longer exists, but that's our world that we live in. It's never been easier to dive and to act. Opportunities are limitless on what you can do with them. I guess the question you'd have to ask is, and I often asked it myself when I was working, would you move to the future, or are you comfortable complaining about what past generations have bequeathed to you? Do you want to look to fit in, to learn how to adapt and establish institutional rules and cultures? Let me give an analogy. Let's say blue suits, white shirts, wingtips. You might remember the old IBM. I left out the straw hats. But today, you really don't have to do that. In fact, I think it's really more exciting than pursuing a steadfast career over 40 years like I did. It's better in many, many ways because you have the ability to drive fundamental change that maybe doesn't present itself in a structured environment. You have the opportunity to remake the systems of the world. You know, and all you have to do is sort of adjust, learn, and fit into it. I think the most powerful asset that you acquired at Hopkins is beyond skill and expertise. And I would say it's the impulse and the desire to seize it, to go out and grab it. I say that because I'll give you one story about myself where I was faced with a decision of the traditional versus the non-traditional from a career perspective. I could have taken a very significant position in one of our US operations, or I could have gone over to an unstructured job in IBM Japan, where I would have been one of 2 Gaijin, or foreigners, and 25,000 Japanese employees. Clearly, the obvious one was take the large position in the United States. The easier path and somewhat straightforward. I chose not to do that. I chose to take a longer-term view, one that I thought I could learn more from. So I took a leap. It meant I was going to have to change. I didn't know how much at the time, but I was going to have to learn how to listen versus talk. I needed to learn how to think in we versus me. And the least of it, I had to function in an impossible language, which I barely understood. Some of the things I said, I hearken back to President Daniels' speech earlier today. We versus me, listen more than talk. The other thing we had to do as a family, and I thank my wife for this, I had to uproot everyone, my wife and 4 children, 2 infants, 2 dogs, and a nanny, and go to Japan for an unstructured job, no guarantee of success, no safety net, no entitlement. Did just fine. The lesson for me was more than the value of learning a multicultural environment, because I worked throughout Asia, but it taught to me that an optimistic path is not always the easy path, and at the end you can't move to the future if you aren't willing to change yourself. So a little advice for you as you think about jobs. Maybe the best decision for you and I, Luke, as we go next, not for our colleagues, is that we go off and join the circus. But if you do that, Luke, right, if you do that, don't model yourself on one of the animals performing tricks for the trainers who throw peanuts. I don't think Luke would ever do that, by the way, in 5 minutes. But think independently, but be passionate about something where the learning is intense and you can grow and constantly broaden your capabilities. If you look at the characteristics of the leaders we work with around the world, a lot of the people we're hiring, that is the characteristic of the people. So there's great optimism in what you see in those individuals and what they can get done. They have a bias towards action. They're impatient to seize the powerful new resources of technologies at their disposal. They want to build a smarter city, a smarter planet, better businesses, better nations, better community involvement. It's in contrast to the political food fights in our legislatures. These new leaders are refreshingly non-ideological, and they're filled with a spirit of pragmatic optimism. So, In ways that go far beyond this institution and beyond you and me, today is truly a time of commencement, and I'd argue for the world. One of my roommates, or any of my roommates, or all of my roommates at Johns Hopkins all went on to pursue graduate degrees. Since I got my honorary degree as a bachelor's, I decided that wasn't the best course for me. The gentleman's C wasn't going to quite cut it. So I instead did the improbable. I joined an institution looking for female engineers. You know, it's probably the most academic institution of all businesses around. As we say in IBM, your PhD is your union card, and your Nobel Prize, there's several rather Nobel Prize winners walking the halls every day. Bit intimidating for a liberal arts guy. But I can tell you it's also very stimulating, and you can learn a lot by working with others and getting them together to solve common objectives or common goals or common societal problems. I'm a little bit older today. I'm probably different than the mature, immature kid 39 years ago, straight out of the hop with a pile of student loans, and yes, I did pay them back. I did not ask the government to relieve me of my debts. It's probably good for you, by the way. Thank you. Now, as a scholarship kid, second generation immigrant Italian. But anyway, put all that aside. It probably was helpful because I was one of the first kid in my family to go to a prestigious university and get a degree in 4 years from college. Others took a little longer along the way. So I just want to encourage you that exciting times are ahead. You should be grateful that all that you've been given up until now by this wonderful institution and by your families and all the support they've provided. But there's tremendous excitement out there. And you and I are both going to enter this transition at the same point in time. To me, I hope you're as excited and positive as I am, because I do believe still we can impact everything that happens in the world. And I hope I have the benefit and the luxury of working with people like you that are smart, clear-headed, and more hopeful than any I've seen, and I've seen a lot of people in 175 countries around the world where we operate. So in that spirit, please seek new opportunities. Please embrace the future with pragmatic optimism, not rose-colored glasses, and embark on life's troubles. And if I can give you one piece of advice, do not limit your options. Do not constrain yourself. Reach out, go for it. Thank you very much.